I think we saw a little bit of leadership with Feroz taking the initiative to organize this conference with her wonderful team, and I'd like to thank them all. I'm here not to talk about retail or business. I'm here to talk about the greatest tragedy that we face and what we can do about it. I've been told I have a few minutes, so I'm going to try to cover it all. But I'll start with something that Joseph Stalin said, the Russian dictator. He said the death of an individual is a tragedy, the death of a million. And he meant, I think what he meant very clearly was that when millions die or when millions suffer, we as individuals don't have the empathy to be able to see their suffering. We can see things in ones and twos. Take it over a dozen and the human being is not able to empathize with a larger sum, which is why we have things like India's incredible, humiliating, degrading poverty as something we live with every single day of our lives and really do nothing about in the broadest sense. What I'm going to try to do today is explain how a possible way to eliminate poverty within 5 years and in the process rebuild India's natural environment. Because the economic models that we see out there to eliminate poverty, implicit in those models is the feeling that you're going to have to sacrifice your environment the way a country like China is doing in order to have rapid economic growth. That is the road we're currently embarked on. But I'm going to put together a different vision, a different road, gets you up the mountain much faster. And I'm going to start with this slide. This is a slide, the title's a little bit faint, but it says, Forest and Mineral Resources in India. This is an interesting slide because if you look at the forest and mineral resources and where they're concentrated in India, and then we move to the next slide here, and you see the most backward districts in India. The Center for Science and Environment in a study actually juxtaposed the two, and it turned out that the poorest districts in India were the districts where there was the most forest, the most minerals, and the most biodiversity. You see, we've all taken for granted an economic system that came to us through the great gurus of Adam Smith and Frederick Hayek, and they propounded this model of the rational utility maximizing individual. And basically the whole world, without questioning it too much, briefly for a 100-year period in history, the communists questioned some of it, but the whole world has basically followed one model in which you have conventional assets. These are, I'm just giving you an example, there are many of these, but they're like oil, you can take coal, you can take gold. The market is a very efficient signaler, allows you to buy and sell commodities with a great deal of efficiency. And one of the great dilemmas in history which got resolved with the failure of communism was that the market-based system came to the fore as really the only viable way to allocate resources. So given that this is, what I'm proposing actually uses the market system to its truest extent, rather than in the limited way we use it right now. Let me move to the next slide here. It turns out that if we leave our conventional minds behind for a minute, there are many other things you can trade. You can trade water, okay, that's a no-brainer. People are doing it, you're buying mineral water, that's a form of water trading. You can trade air, you can trade forest cover, you can trade biodiversity. Now, these, I've listed these in a way so that you start with something which you can say, yeah, stretch your mind a little, water can be traded, air, forest cover, biodiversity. How do we trade these things? And in trading these things and in recognizing that these are assets, and what I call the last two, actually the first, third and fourth are assets which need to be maintained. You can actually create water, you can actually create forest cover, you can actually create biodiversity. Unlike gold, which cannot be created in the short run, these things can be added to.
I was speaking to a group of about
solid and
300
toxic
kids,
waste as well.
ages 6 to 8, at
Now,
a children's museum. And
if you
I
look
brought
at
with me
how
a bag full
at
of
the
legs,
heart of
similar to the
capitalism
kinds
is
of
the
things
idea
we
of
have
a
here, and
market.
had them laid out on a
And
table
if you look at how true markets
for the
work,
kids.
they always
And from my
have
experience, you know, kids are
common to
naturally
true
curious
markets anywhere
about
are
what they
three
don't know,
elements.
don't understand, or
They are a
foreign to
way
them.
of
They only learn to be
standardization,
frightened of those
a way of
differences when
exchanging,
an adult
and a way of
influences them to
regulators.
behave
Now, by
that
an
way,
exchange, I don't mean
and
a
maybe
stock
censors
exchange.
that natural
Anytime
curiosity,
two or three people
you know,
meet
reins
to
in
buy
the
and sell
question
something,
asking
that is
for
a form of
in
exchange.
the hopes of them being polite little kids.
Anytime you have
So, I mean,
any
I
kind,
just pictured a first grade teacher out in
whether
the lobby
it's
with
commercial
unruly
organization
kids saying,
or a
"Whatever
court
you
of
do,
law, that
don't
takes
stare
the
at
form
her
of
legs."
regulator.
When
And
of course,
anytime you
that's the
work
point.
out a
That's why I
method
was
of
there. I
measurement,
wanted to invite them
that
to
becomes
look
a
and
standard.
explore. So I made a deal
Let's take
with
water,
the
for
adults
example.
that the kids could come in without any adults.
If you
for 2
had a
minutes.
standard authority that could certify the quality of water, because water comes in very different, it comes from, as Mr. Mishra very correctly pointed, it comes from incredibly polluted to incredibly pristine and pure. So if you had a standards authority that could actually certify the quality of water, you then have a commodity with a standard which can then be traded on an exchange. The advantage of an exchange, and much more so in today's world where information is freely available and freely communicated, is the exchange finds out the price of something. And it uses the net buyers and net sellers to discover a price. And that's what economists call the price discovery mechanism. A regulator is important because whenever large sums of wealth and commodities are being traded, there is a tendency for systems to form monopolies. This is actually very basic standard economics. How we're going to use this is what you're going to see in the next couple of slides. I call this system true markets because without water, without air, without forest and biodiversity, and without a way of getting rid of your waste, i.e. again I go back to Mr. Mishra's presentation on Varanasi, if you don't have a way of getting rid of your waste or have a way of ensuring there's biodiversity, you put yourself in long-term peril. So I'm just talking about true markets as ones that recognize the entire gamut of what we need for equality of human existence. This is why you can end poverty, you can reduce waste, you can encourage biodiversity, and you can have strong environmental protection. And the way you do that is by figuring out first, you ask yourself, what is poverty? We talk about it all the time. The newspapers are full of it all the time. The government talks about it all the time. They have committees and ministries. But what is poverty? I define poverty. And I have traveled to 500 of India's 611 districts. And this is how I define poverty. Poverty is the inaccessibility to 6 basic needs. I was recently in a place in Bombay where people were earning 25,000 rupees a month, which doesn't make them poor. But they didn't have any of the following 6 needs. So in that way, they were poor. Nutrition, drinking water, and notice the words drinking water because most of the water that people drink in the country is actually not fit for human consumption. Healthcare, education, and legal assistance. The reason legal assistance is there is because the Constitution of India is an amazing document. It is one that guarantees to every citizen a set of rights that very, very few countries have been able to match in the human experience. The problem is accessing those rights. And in order to access those rights, you need to put down legal assistance, without which the rights just remain something that exists on paper. Sewage disposal is. Okay. What I have worked on is something called a targeted catalyst. Now, it's different from the way aid is conventionally given. We've all heard the story of the best way to give aid to someone is teach them how to fish, not give them a fish a day. Right? Unfortunately, governments often put this on their reports, but they do the exact opposite. They put everybody on a fish a day. Every program of the government is not about enablement. It's not about empowerment. It's about actually creating a constituency, a vote bank, or whatever, which you feed through your various schemes. This is where the idea of a targeted catalyst comes in. A targeted catalyst, as this expression says, is a limited, extremely precise, targeted intervention into poverty. And this is how it works. A targeted catalyst consists of 6 vouchers. It does not consist of giving money to people, because I think that is pretty degrading. Making 400 million people beggars is not a good way to govern a country. Instead, you create a targeted catalyst which comprises of 6 vouchers to provide individuals with the 6 basic requirements. Each voucher can be redeemed at the service provider at par, premium, or at a discount. Now, this is very important. There is no shortage of schools in India. The fact is, everybody sends their kids to private schools because the public school system is lousy. What you do is, if a voucher carries a face value of 100 rupee, and it is exchanged at an institution which is graded to be superior, then the 100 rupee voucher actually translates for a higher sum of money. And the reason to do this, and to do the opposite when the institution is of poor quality. If the local school is of poor quality, the 100 rupee voucher actually is changed, converted for cash by the school authorities at a sum less than 100. You're doing 3 things by doing this. One is you send a very clear signal that quality education will earn a higher price than poor quality education. The second is, if anybody in the local community wants to build another school and wants to build a quality school or improve the school that exists, there is a very strong financial incentive to do so, which is built into the voucher system. Let me show you how this works. Today, technology, one of the great gifts of technology, has given us the capacity, and this is universally recognized, there is no doubt about this, the capacity to measure aggregate economic activity. Most of us today, and most people in the developed world, do most of their spending on credit cards. A way of measuring aggregate economic activity, and some of the people who've done the most work on the forefront of this are people from India, is actually to give every citizen a cashless way to dematerialize the cash economy, which is basically everybody has a card by which they can transfer and receive money. It's a bank account linked to a card. There's no rocket science to this. All the ideas have been worked out. The science is feasible, everything. When you do that, you do 2 things. One is you eliminate the black economy overnight. It's very easy, and there will be some holdouts, but as you eliminate cash, people will be forced to use this dematerialized cash. We have dematerialized shares. When they came out, everybody said, oh, who's going to go to the stock exchanges and buy a dematerialized share? Well, everybody does it without question. This will take a few years to get accepted, but when it does get accepted, it's going to be radical, and this is why. If the government defines a poverty line as this, and that will be a moving target, all you have to do is track the individual's aggregate economic activity. Now, let's say the breadwinner dies in the family. He's an auto rickshaw driver and the breadwinner dies. This is what happens. The family's aggregate economic activity drops below the poverty line, and you start administering the targeted catalysts. These are like almost administering shots of injections, which actually don't cost the government very much money because they're administered for a short time. And they're administered till the individual or the family's aggregate economic activity crosses the threshold. The other part of this poverty alleviation program, and the way you save the environment, is that you make it a right that for every individual born in the country, there must be a certain amount of forest cover and biodiversity. You know, it's hard to wrap your mind around this concept, because at one level people say you need water to drink, so we need 10 liters or 5 liters of water to drink. But you actually need forest cover and biodiversity to survive. If the Himalayan watershed is not maintained, the consequences for the rest of the country will be catastrophic. So why not take that into account in the economic model? Why are you leaving that out of your economic model? And the way to bring it into the economic model is to say, right, for every citizen, you must have 5 square feet of forest cover and 5 square feet of biodiversity cover. And when you do that, you've actually created a massive way of transferring wealth from the rich enclaves of India to the poor enclaves of India. Remember the first 2 maps that you see. There will be a massive transfer of wealth from the rich to the poor, but it won't be for free. The wealth transfer will occur when the poor who live in those areas protect their forests, protect their biodiversity, and therefore generate a surplus which they then sell to the wealthier enclaves, which are almost all urban areas in this country. all the cities of India would have to purchase these credits from communities having them in surplus, which means Delhi would have to purchase its credits from Jharkhand, from Chhattisgarh, from all the Maoist-infected areas, from all, and we would be paying them for maintaining the biodiversity cover of the Himalayas, of Arunachal Pradesh, the Western Ghats. All that would be paid for. And the locals who do that for free today would be paid. That will change the economic balance in this country dramatically. Thank you very much.